Your role has been eliminated, he said without even flinching. You have until the end of the day to clear out your desk. My name is Evan Miles, 56 years old. Until that moment, I was senior network analyst at Delcroft Systems, a regional logistics software firm based in Cincinnati. I'd been there 17 years. That building had seen my gray hairs come in, my kids graduate college, and my marriage nearly end from the hours I put into that place. I sat across from Marcus Layton, the new VP of Operations, young, suited, and surgically detached. His voice had the precision of someone used to firing people without losing sleep. Next to him was Krista from HR, already clutching a manila envelope. 2 months severance, a boilerplate thank you letter, and a list of instructions about what I couldn't say or do moving forward. I didn't say much, just nodded, collected the envelope, and left. There was no point in asking why. The answer was already obvious. They thought I was obsolete. At my desk, I packed up slowly. My team didn't make eye contact. Maybe they were scared too. Most of them were barely out of college, and I'd trained half of them myself, line by line, system by system. They knew code, but they didn't know my code. The custom backbone I'd built over 17 years, one patch at a time, one crash at a time. It wasn't just software. It was a breathing organism, and every organ inside it answered to me. I dropped my photo frame into the box, my wife and our kids at Lake Erie 5 summers ago. The cactus I kept in the window, still alive somehow. My old trackball mouse I never let anyone borrow. Little relics of consistency. When I reached the parking lot, I turned and stared up at the building one last time. 12 stories of metal and glass that felt more like home than my own house had during certain years. And just like that, I was out, forgotten, efficiently erased. They had no idea what they'd done. When I joined Delcroft's, the company was just a whisper. 10 employees and 2 mid-sized clients. Their network was duct tape and hope. My first project was rebuilding their routing algorithm to stop crashing during peak hours. Took me 4 sleepless nights and 1 near heart attack, but I got it done, and I stayed. Through acquisitions, through budget freezes, through a dozen product overhauls and 6 CIOs who each thought they'd reinvent the wheel, the one constant? Me. I didn't build fancy dashboards. I built the plumbing that kept their entire operation from collapsing. 5 years ago, they hired Marcus, fresh off some consultancy gig in New York. He talked a lot about agile pivots and cost-weighted infrastructure. I translated that to mean, cut the old guys. It started slow. Fewer invites to meetings, less input on product direction. They began pushing outsourced solutions I'd warned them against. But it wasn't until last fall that I noticed my admin credentials were being tweaked. I didn't react. I logged everything, every permission change, every access override, every new IP flagged in the system logs. They thought they were easing me out quietly, but I saw everything. Back home, the silence was heavier than I expected. My wife Karen met me at the door with a calm face, but her eyes said more. It happened, didn't it? I nodded, setting the cardboard box on the dining table. She didn't ask for details. After 29 years of marriage, she knew when to wait. That night, I sat in my home office and pulled out an old encrypted drive from the bottom drawer. I hadn't touched it in years, not since the Endover audit. Back then, the legal team had asked me to build a full-chain access log in case of another insider breach. I told them I needed off-site redundancy and full data authority to do it right. They signed off, then forgot. That system still ran, quiet, undetected, and it had been recording everything. The next morning, I reviewed what I had. Complete records of backdoor access to Delcroft's internal vendor system, a series of payments to a company called Northfall Metrics, business address, a UPS drop box in Dayton, ownership, registered under a holding firm tied to Jeremy Layton, Marcus's cousin. I felt the familiar hum of adrenaline settle in. They didn't just fire me. They fired the only person who could track their scheme. Each payment was small, 10 grand here, 15 there. But monthly, over 2 years, the total hovered just under $1 million. Fake licensing fees for software I knew we didn't use. They'd buried it in the approval system using a junior accounting manager who likely had no idea what she was authorizing. Clever enough to avoid surface-level scrutiny, but not clever enough to fool someone who built the system they were stealing from. I didn't rush. I copied everything, tripled it, backed it up in the cloud, on a flash drive, and in a private repository I controlled. Then I waited, because Wednesday was board day, and I knew Marcus would be presenting Delcroft's Q2 performance like everything was perfect. He had no idea that by the end of the day, everything was going to burn. Wednesday arrived bright and crisp. I pulled into a diner 2 blocks from Delcroft's headquarters, the kind with burnt coffee, chipped mugs, and a window view of everything I needed to see. In my passenger seat sat a worn-out laptop running a cloaked email client I'd built years ago for internal testing. At 8:42 a.m., I hit send. Subject line: urgent, suspicious financial pattern in vendor payments. Recipient: Marcus Layton. The message was short, surgical, a summary of payment anomalies tied to Northfall metrics. No accusations, no dramatic language, just enough data to spook him. I sipped my coffee and waited. At 9:17, my phone buzzed. Marcus. I let it ring out. He left a message. Evan, we need to talk about this email. This isn't funny. Please call me back immediately. No, thank you. By 9:40, another call came in. Krista from HR, then another from a block number. Probably legal. They were moving quickly now. That was good. They were scared, but they hadn't seen the second wave. At 10 a.m. sharp, I dropped the real bomb, a blind copy of my full audit report to every member of Delcroft's board. Attached were clean PDF summaries, notarized metadata logs, payment trails, and archived user access logs, all verified, all time-stamped. The kind of evidence you don't unsee, and I didn't stop there. At 10:12, I uploaded a mirrored copy to a private archive and scheduled a timed email to 3 external contacts, 2 financial journalists and 1 compliance investigator I'd worked with during the Andover audit. If anything happened to me or my wife, they'd get access. I wasn't playing games. I was enforcing a system protocol, one they had never learned to respect. By 11 o'clock, panic had started to bleed into public channels. Stephen, a former junior analyst I'd mentored, messaged me from a private account. Something's up. Marcus is locked in with legal. Phone's going nuts. Did you do something? I responded with 2 words, keep watching. He didn't reply, but I could imagine the wheels turning. At 12:23, my personal email dinged, a generic HR message. Subject: cease and desist, breach of confidentiality. I almost laughed. They still thought this was a game they could win with policy, but I'd never signed their separation agreement because they'd never offered one, just a cold box and a parking pass. Now they wanted silence. Now they wanted me to go away. At 1:47, the first public crack formed. A mid-tier financial blog posted an anonymous tip. Whistleblower claims fraud inside Delcroft Systems. Senior execs implicated in vendor laundering scheme. No names, not yet. But the story was live. Indexed, shared, screenshot. I didn't leak it. But someone on that board definitely had. At 2:04, my phone rang again. This time from Gina Maxwell, the company's general counsel. I took this one. Mr. Mile, she said briskly, we believe you may be in possession of sensitive internal information. I am, I said. May I ask how you obtained it? I built the system, I replied, and I maintained full off-site logging authority, signed off by your office 4 years ago. Silence. We'd like to request a formal conversation to understand your concerns. My concerns are already in the report, I said calmly. But if you'd like to add clarification for the SEC, I can note that in the next version. You've shared this externally? Only if necessary. The line went dead. By 3 a.m., Delcroft's internal servers were on lockdown. I knew the signs. Employees frozen out of email, VPN access revoked, internal comms suspended. I'd orchestrated similar lockdowns before, for breaches, for insider leaks. Now I was the breach, Stephen messaged again. Whatever you did, it's serious. Board is in emergency session. Marcus and CFO both pulled from the floor. I leaned back in my booth and exhaled slowly. I wasn't angry, not anymore. This wasn't revenge. It was correction. You don't tear down a house because you're mad at the roof. You do it because the foundation is rotting and pretending otherwise is dangerous for everyone still living inside. That evening I returned home. Karen was already on the porch waiting. They called the house, she said. Twice. Some guy named Phillips, and then someone from the board, I think. I nodded. They're feeling the heat. She studied me quietly. Are you? I thought about it. The fear, the guilt. Those had passed days ago. What remained was purpose, precision. The same feeling I had when I was solving a critical bug in a crashing server at 2 a.m. while the world slept. No, I said softly. They're just starting to realize the system didn't need them, but it needed me. At 9:15 that night, I got the call I'd been expecting. Robert Flynn, Delcroft board member, old school, sharp, paranoid. He once made me rewrite our encryption protocols after reading an article about quantum computing. Evan, he said without greeting, we've reviewed your report, and let's just say it's thorough. I waited. The board is taking this seriously, very seriously. There will be consequences. I'm counting on that. We want to meet. Tomorrow morning. Off record, no lawyers, just clarity. I considered it, then agreed. Someplace neutral, I added. I'll text you an address. Bring everything. I hung up, stood up, and finally let myself breathe. Tomorrow wasn't Judgment Day. That had already begun. Tomorrow was about options. The next morning, I arrived at a quiet executive club on the edge of downtown. Oak walls, leather chairs, the kind of place where deals are made behind closed doors and secrets don't echo. Robert Flynn was already seated. He waved me over without standing. Mr. Miles, he said, appreciate you coming. On the table sat a leather folder, thick, my report, printed and marked up. Color tabs stuck out like battle flags. This is serious, he said, and unfortunately, very real. We've verified enough to open a formal internal investigation. He leaned forward. CFO is already on leave. Marcus is being questioned this afternoon. Jason Phillips is claiming he had no idea where the invoices came from. I didn't speak. Robert sighed. I'll be honest. Half the board wants to go nuclear, fire them all, call the press, launch the PR machine. The other half is afraid of what that exposure will do to investor confidence. That's not my concern, I replied. He studied me for a long moment. No, it's not. But I think you do care about the people still inside that building, the ones who didn't know what was happening, the ones who might lose their jobs when this blows up. I didn't respond, but he was right. I had trained those people, watched them grow. Some were still kids when I took them under my wing. Robert slid another folder across the table. We want to offer you a return, not to your old position, something higher, something with teeth. I opened it. Chief Integrity Officer, direct report to the board, independent authority over security, compliance, and IT ethics, full control of all audit systems, budgetary oversight, whistleblower protections for staff, and an unrestricted mandate to rebuild the protocols from scratch. It was everything I'd begged for years ago. The system, the transparency, the tools, and now they were mine to command if I wanted them. I closed the folder. What happens to Marcus? Depends on what he says under oath, Robert said flatly, but we've already pulled his access. Same with the CFO. There will be charges, no doubt. Phillips is more complicated. His consulting firm was the money funnel. I nodded. I want one more condition. Robert raised an eyebrow. No hiring freeze. If I'm building this right, I'll need real people. Not interns, not contractors, real analysts, and I'll need Steven on my team. Robert gave a small smile. You always were thinking 5 moves ahead. I stood. That's why your company's still standing. Back home, Karen waited quietly. I handed her the offer letter. She scanned it slowly, then looked up. So, you're going back? I leaned against the counter. Not to what I left, to something new. Is it revenge? She asked gently. No, I said. It's repair. The next day, news broke publicly. Delcroft executives under internal investigation amid vendor fraud allegations. The article didn't name me, but people knew. By afternoon, I had 15 messages from former coworkers, some confused, some apologetic, some grateful. Most said the same thing. We had no idea. That night, I stood in my old office, now cleared out. Nothing left but the faded mark on the wall where my family photo used to hang. I didn't stay long. I had a new office now. Top floor, frosted glass, quiet HVAC, a full whiteboard wall, and a clean slate. My first move was quiet, unfreezing systems that had been overprotected out of fear. Then I built a real audit tool, one that didn't just track users, but behavior, anomaly detection, real-time flags, and a full access transparency log that pinged to legal, if anything, shifted outside standard hours. I gave Steven his own team and let him redesign our load monitoring system. He tripled performance in 2 weeks. The kid had always had it. He just needed someone who saw it. We initiated full documentation training across departments. Every corner of the network would be mapped. Every access level tagged. No more backdoors. No more forgotten approvals. No more shadows. At the first internal town hall, I stood on stage and addressed the entire IT division. I was fired 3 months ago because they thought the system could run without me. They were wrong, not because I'm irreplaceable, but because they never understood what any of us do. Silence. I'm not here to punish. I'm here to build a structure that protects the right people and exposes the wrong ones, automatically. And if you're with me, we're going to make sure no one ever has to go through what I did just to be heard. The room erupted. Not applause, just the sound of people finally exhaling. At lunch the following week, I sat alone on the top floor terrace overlooking downtown. Karen joined me with sandwiches and a smirk. So this is what a retired tech guy looks like? I didn't plan on being here, I said, but maybe I was always headed this way. She raised her cup. To burning down what needed to go. I shook my head. Not burned, just rebuilt better. 6 months later, Delcroft didn't just look different, it was different. The board had removed 3 executives. Charges were filed. Investigations confirmed over $4.7 million in fraudulent payments traced through Northfall Metrics and Phillips's firm. All recoverable? Number. But enough was clawed back to restore investor trust. Marcus had cut a deal, turned over records, and swore he'd been manipulated by the CFO. He avoided jail time but walked out with a ruined name and 0 chance at a second act in tech. The CFO wasn't so lucky. 3 felony charges, a federal fraud case pending. Jason Phillips? He disappeared for a while, then resurfaced in a blog post about rebranding in Bali. That didn't last. Delcroft's lawyers were waiting when he landed in LA. I watched all this from a quiet place. Not from the sidelines, but from above, because now I had access to everything. And I wasn't using it to settle scores. I was using it to protect people who had once been invisible, just like I had been. Steven's team grew from 4 analysts to 15 and a quarter. His redesign of our data redundancy pipeline prevented 2 major outages before they even happened. He didn't brag about it. He just fixed things. I made sure the board noticed. The whiteboard in my office filled up quickly. System flow charts, detection rules, access trees. The kind of diagrams most executives tune out in meetings. But I wasn't presenting anymore. I was implementing. By the third quarter, we rolled out Project Canary, our new internal security flag system. It didn't just monitor network access. It tracked patterns, people, contracts, and every single thing flagged came straight to me. I wasn't a gatekeeper. I was a mirror. The company changed. But so did I. I started arriving later, going home earlier. No more midnight fixes. No more silent weekends buried in terminal windows. I took Karen to Vermont for a week in October. She made me leave my laptop at home. We walked, watched the leaves fall, ate things I couldn't pronounce, and for once, the world didn't end without me, because I had finally built a system that didn't need a hero. It just needed to work, and it did. One crisp Monday morning, I got an unexpected message from Robert Flynn. Board approved your ethics grant proposal. $1 million over 3 years. You're clear to start your initiative. That proposal had been sitting on my desk for months, an internal fund to teach ethical architecture to rising engineers, with mentorships, case studies, and real-world simulations. Not just how to build systems, but how to protect them from people like Marcus and Brian. We called it the Miles Foundation, Karen's idea. The first class launched that winter. 12 participants, some from inside Delcroft, some from other companies, 2 from nonprofits. I sat in the back on the first day, listening to them dissect a real-world breach and explain how it could have been prevented. And I smiled, because the best revenge isn't payback. It's removal of weakness, of blindness, of the cracks no one else wants to seal. The best revenge is strength, quiet, enduring, untouchable. 1 year after the day I was fired, I stood again at Delcroft's front steps. This time, not as an employee, not even as an executive, but as a guest speaker. I was giving the keynote for the company's internal tech summit. The theme? Systems that survive when integrity becomes infrastructure. They gave me a badge at the front desk, same receptionist. She looked up, smiled nervously, then said, "Welcome back, Mr. Miles." I nodded, but I never really left. That afternoon on my personal blog, I posted just one line. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is quietly outlast everyone who underestimated you. And as I closed the tab, I saw the comments begin to pour in. People knew. They always eventually know.